Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I hope you are well wherever you are. I'm certain we will have today, in the early morning here in Brazil, a wide international audience to listen to Professor Olga Kazakevich at Abralin's support event, Linguists Online. As you know, Linguists Online is promoted by the Brazilian Linguists Association, Abralin, in cooperation with Permanent International Committee of Linguists, the Association of Latin American Linguists and Philology, the Argentine Society of Linguistic Studies, Brazilian Applied Linguistics Association, International Association of Applied Linguistics, Linguistic Society of America, Linguistics Association of Great Britain, the Linguistic Society of Europe, Australian Linguistic Society, British Association of Applied Linguistics and Sociedade Espanhola de Linguística. My name is Mônica Saavedra. I'm a professor of sociolinguistics in the field of language contact at the University Federal Fluminense. English is not my first foreign language, so I apologize myself, but I will do my best. And today, I have the pleasure to introduce and moderate the lecture of Professor Olga Kazakevich. Professor Olga Kazakevich has graduated from Philological Faculty of Lomonosov Moscow State University, Department for Structural and Applied Linguistics, and she had postgraduate student there. In 1989, she took her doctor's degree in linguistics at the same university for the thesis Computer Databases of the Selkap Languages, Creation and Use in Linguistic Research. Most part of her professional life was connected with Laboratory for Computational Lexicography Research Computing Center at Lomonosov Moscow State University. She started working there as a junior researcher right after her postgraduate studies. In 1975, for 11 years, from May 2008 up to mid-2018, she runs the laboratory and she is actually its director. Olga Kazakevich is a pioneer in using the computer for processing of linguistic data of the languages of Autochthonous population of Siberia. Computer database of Selkap text became a rich source of unique linguistic material. In 2003, she was awarded the honorable title Distinguished Researcher of Lomonosov Moscow State University. Professor Kazakevich is the Samoyedologist. She is an active field linguist dealing with documentation and description of endangered languages of Siberia, primarily Selkap, Ket, and Evenki, their languages and folklore. Her research addresses linguistic topology, sociolinguistics, language situation of indigenous minority of Russia, language endangerment, language context, use of computers in linguistic studies, and visual anthropology. Some information of the Siberian projects can be found on the website Minority Language of Siberia, Our Cultural Heritage, and Professor Olga Kazakevich is going to show us after her lecture. This project is one of the results of her laboratory's activities on the material of the languages of the basis of Middle Hisenkin and Middle Up Pass rivers. The objective of the project was to develop a multimedia website containing comprehensive data on these autochthonous minority languages. I myself invited everyone to visit the site, and we are going to do it after her speech. Olga Kazakevich also coordinated international projects at the Russian-Japanese Point, aiming at the creation of the English version of the sociolinguistic database in the main languages of Russia. The work was done by the Institute of Linguistics of the Russian Academy of Science and the University of Tokyo. In 2019, she was invited to the Institute of Linguistics, Russian Academy of Science, to head a newly created laboratory for research into a support of minority language. And so she changed the institution, and she still remains in the other one. But she was also connected with one more institution, Russian State University for the Humanities, where she lectures since 2000 as a part-time association professor at the Institute of Linguistics. About her main publication, she published over 190 works, including 6 monographs. She is one of the authors of the University Grammar of Selkap, St. Petersburg, 2002, the first and up to now the only textbooks of a Nordheim minority language of Russia for the university level, and many other relevant publications and articles and books edited by Mouton de Courieux and other editors, particularly in Russia, that unfortunately I will not be able to pronounce them correctly. Today, Professor Kazakevich will present us her lecture entitled Autochthonous Languages of Siberia and the Far East, Documentation, Functioning, Language Contacts, and Language Shift in Ethno-Local Groups. Professor Kazakevich, thank you so much for accepting Abralin's invitation. And now, I have the pleasure to give you the floor. Dobry dzień, Olga, I Pachusta.
Switch on. All I have to switch on. Oh, that's like that. Thank you very much, Monica. I want, first of all, to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak about our expeditions, our findings, language documentation in Siberia and the Far East. So thank you very much. And now I will start with an overview of languages of Siberia. Shall I do it for the whole screen? Yes. I have to. Oh, I see. I must do like that. Yeah. Okay. So in Siberia and the Far East, languages of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 families are present, plus 1 isolate and 1 mixed language. And I'll show you the map of Siberia and the Far East, the Russian Far East, in the 17th century. This map was compiled by Boris Dolgich, our prominent anthropologist. And here you can see languages of the area, some 400 years ago. And the colors show the families. So I think, yes, I can show. We can find a lot of light green. These are Tungusic languages, so Altaic Tungusic group of Altaic languages. We have not so much yellow. Yellow are Turkic languages, Altaic Turkic. And from the same family, we have a little bit of dark yellow Mongolic languages. Then we can see lots, vast territory occupied by tribes who spoke Yukagir languages. It is supposed that the Yukagir groups were the first population of the area. and the Tungusic and Uralic groups came later and moved the Yukagis. But in the 17th century, the Yukagis occupied quite a large territory yet. Here, blue are some Uralic languages, Samoyedic, Uralic Samoyedic. By that time, they moved from the south of Siberia, and only small groups of speaking Samoyedic languages remained there. These groups were later assimilated by Turkic groups coming there. And we see dark green, these are Ugric languages of the Uralic family. And pretty large territory was occupied by the Ket language family. Now we have only one language of this family left. Okay, and this is the present day situation. The map was compiled by Yuri Karyakov, Languages of Siberia and the Far East. And we see how Turkic languages moved everywhere, and Yakut, the Yakut language is here. It occupied a small territory and now it's everywhere. And this is the territory of Sakha-Yakutia Republic. The Tungusic languages, the the peoples speaking Tungusic languages were partly assimilated by the Yakuts. And the same groups remain, but look at the Ket language. Only very small territory and very few people speaking Ket remain today. Samoyedic languages, Tundra Nenets, Nganasan and Enets, and North Selkup and South Selkup here to the south. The Selkups and the Kets moved to the north after the 17th century, in the middle of the 17th century. And Tungusic people also, Tungusic speaking people also moved to the north by that time. And a new language appeared since that, Dolgan language. It's a Turkic language, but the ethnic group was compiled of representatives of Yakuts, of Yakuts, Evenkis, and Russians who came to the very north. And now we'll see the list of the languages in groups, and I'll say some words about so you can see the number of speakers here in parentheses, and I'll say something about the status of the languages. So Uralic languages, we have two Ugric languages here, North Khanty and East Khanty, three, sorry, East Khanty and Mansi. I said two because the Khanty language was split in two languages by the linguists not long ago. comparing with the beginning of this millennium, we now have more languages in Siberia than by that time, just because of some splits of languages. So 3 Ugric languages, Samoyedic languages. We have 2 Nenets. We had only 1 Nenets language before, and now it is split into 2 languages. Specialists in Nenets think that it's worthwhile dividing the language into 2 idioms. Before some 30 years ago, these 2 languages were kept for dialects. No, it's clear. Then Enets, we have also tundra Enets and forest Enets. And here we have severely endangered, 2 severely endangered languages. Tundra Enets is spoken by less than 10 people, and forest Enets by about 25 people, and not all of them full speakers, by the way. Nganasan 93, this figure includes all kinds of speakers of all levels of language competence. So full speakers are much less. North Selkirk with about 6,000 speakers, but this figure also includes all kinds of speakers, all levels of competence, from full speakers down to just rememberers. And here we have Southern Selkirk, South Selkirk, and this is the language. Well, it's a newly built, not built. So Selkirk was split quite recently into 2 languages, and it was split into 2 languages formally, yes. At the moment when only 3 speakers of the southern dialect group of Selkirk remained. 3 speakers, 2 speakers of one dialect and 1 speaker of another dialect, and there is some about 10 dialects in South Selkirk. There are no less than that. Well, and we have also 1 Permic language. While Komi Ziriane, Ijma dialect, speaking Ijma dialect, came to Siberia some 200 years ago and stayed there. They herd reindeer, and well, they learned to do it from Nenets, and now they are also a language of Siberia, though the majority of Komi reside in the European part of Russia, and there is a republic, a Komi Republic, where Komi is an official language. Well, Altaic languages, we have 3 groups: Tungusic, Mongolic, and Turkic. And in Tungusic, we have Evenki and Even. They split into 2 languages, yes, diverse somewhere after the 17th century, or this split started in the 17th century. But both languages are dialectal. So with the Evenki, there are over 50 dialects which are grouped into three dialect groups, but inside those dialect groups, the differences is rather rather big, really, in all levels, not only in phonetic levels, also in grammar, not to speak of the lexics. Negidal, and Negidal should be green because there are only 7 or now even maybe 6 speakers of Negidal left. The Negidal group is also a small ethnic group, but only 7 speakers. Nanai, you know, these figures 7 and 6 now, because it changes quite quickly. These languages with very few speakers have speakers of only in the elder generation. So people pass away slowly, and no one comes up speaking the language, supporting the language through speaking it. 1,300, it's the figure of the population census 2010. In reality, there are less full speakers, much less full speakers, but also semi-speakers are not so many. Ulchi, also under 100, and Udehi also under 100, and Ulta under 10 people. Only 5 full speakers, though the language is not the first but the second for them. They mostly speak Russian, but among the practically all of these full speakers of Ulta or Orok are language activists, and they do a lot to support the language, and they write textbooks for school and for grown-ups, compile dictionaries, translate, decipher and old texts recorded but not translated. And they also write in Ulta themselves. Mongolic group, we have only Buryat in Siberia, and its blue are, so to say, big languages, and languages with the Republican status. They are official language in republics. So the Republic Buryatia, and the official language of the Republic is Buryat. Altai, almost 22,000 speakers, but of different level also, and there are problems with Buryat, and especially in cities, in big cities. Altai, it's also an official language in the Republic Altai, 46,000 speakers of various level, and 2 strong languages. That's what we have in Siberia, Tuvinian and Yakut. So with these languages, there is no problem of no problem of language shift, though in the cities, young people sometimes shift to Russian, but not the whole groups. So these are strong languages, and Yakut language and many, not so many, but some languages of Siberia have shifted and go on shifting to Yakut today. Khakas, the fifth Republican language, official language of the Khakas Republic, with almost 33,000 speakers. Also, there are problems with Khakas, and not everywhere in all places where people speak Khakas. It is well preserved, but still. I won't speak anymore about these big languages. Somehow, in comparison to other minority languages of the area, they are all right somehow. And then small languages, minority languages are coming. Turkic languages, Kumandin with about 500 speakers, Tuba with 200, Chelkan with 280, Telut, Telengit has more speakers, Shor. But not all the speakers are full speakers, and not all of them, the languages are native languages, though as for native languages, some people claim to have their ethnic language native, even in the situation when they don't know anything from the language, don't speak it, because native language is sort of a badge of ethnic identity today, especially for small ethnic groups. Then we have Tofa language, under 20 speakers, Chulim Turkic, under 20 speakers, and we have Siberian Tatar. But here, this group will be possibly split into 2 or 3 groups, because there are linguistic evidence for that. But now we have the figure of the whole Siberian Tatar group. Well, Yeniseic languages, do you remember the territory of Yeniseic languages in the 17th century? Now there is only one living language left, Ket, and it has about 60 speakers, but no more than 20 to 25 full speakers. 60, here we have all speakers, including rememberers. Chukotko-Kamchatkan languages, Chukchi, rather strong language, and Koryak, Aluto, and Itelmen, no more than 10 speakers left, maybe some more rememberers, but the situation is grave with Itelmen. As Kalutic languages, we have now 2 living, still living Eskimo languages, Siberian Yupik, also called Chaplinsky Yupik and Naukan Yupik. Siberian Yupik, 350 speakers, including all kinds of competence. Speakers of all kinds, with all kinds of competence, and Naukan Yupik under 100 speakers. And there are only 2 Aleut speakers left. Yukagir languages, if you remember the vast territory in the northeast of the Far East. Now we have 2 small languages, Tundra Yukagir, about 60 speakers of all levels of competence, and Kolyma Yukagir, no more than 10 speakers. We have the remnants of one Sino-Tibetan language. It's Tas language, and Tas, it comes from a Chinese word. These are groups of Udihe and Nanais, Udihes and Nanais, who switched who shifted to Chinese, Chinese, Northern Chinese, one of the Northern Chinese dialects. Well, under 10 semi-speakers, maybe some 20 years ago, there were also full speakers of the language, but no more today, as far as I am informed. Well, we have an isolate, Nifch, also not many speakers, and the Nifchs, they reside in the Sakhalin and mostly in the north and in the northern part of Sakhalin, and also in the low flow of the Amur River. We had 2 isolates in the 17th century. Because we had Sakhalin Ainu by that time, and they resided at that time in the south of Kamchatka, of the Kamchatka Peninsula, and also in the Kuril Islands. And we have a mixed language, Copper Island Aleut, with also 2 speakers. One of these 2 speakers learned Aleut proper, and when he learned it, the 2 speakers are elderly people, and being after his 60s, one of these speakers of Copper Island Aleuts learned Aleut, and he speaks it now. Well, languages of the area which disappeared within the last 50 years, and early 2000s was also the time of language disappearance. West Mansi disappeared at that time, and Kamas, and the dates are the dates of the death of the last speaker of these languages. When the precise date is unknown, then just early 2000s or late 1960s is written. Well, I must say the majority of the languages of the area are written. at least those which were not dialects of other languages some 20 years ago. And rather many of the languages are taught at school, at least at primary school, and some are also sporadically used in press, on radio and TV. Unfortunately, it doesn't help much to stop the language shift, which is on. As for the documentation, practically all languages of the area, but for those that until recently were regarded as dialects of other languages, are documented to some extent, at least. And for all of these languages, we have grammars, or at least grammar sketches, and at least one of or more dictionaries. But quite often, these are grammars and dictionaries of one particular dialect chosen to represent a language standard, so to say. And other dialects, which can considerably differ from the chosen standard, remain underdocumented quite often. Now many researchers, not also to compare with the researchers working at big languages, but still researchers and research groups are doing documentation of endangered languages in Russia. Some groups were or are now supported, mostly were, by international foundations, and we also have foundations now. I'm afraid only one foundation is left, but some smaller ones too, which support documentation projects. So what the documentation project includes today, modern documentation projects include audio and video recording of texts and audio recording of lexical lists and grammar questionnaires. All should be audio recorded, and texts are mostly video recorded. At least in my group, I always try to organize video recording of texts and everything. And what is rather new now, and it is connected with the awful situation with the language shift. To record linguistic information, it's necessary to know the language situation in the group where you want to work. So documenting linguistic situation in local autochthonous communities is absolutely necessary. And more, some 20 or 30 even years ago, many linguists did not very much respect sociolinguistics. Linguists doing field work, working with endangered language, they did not respect sociolinguistics very much. But now more and more linguists and begin to understand that it's absolutely impossible to understand the language structure, especially in the situation of language shift, in the groups where language shift is in hand, not understanding the linguistic situation in the community where the recordings are being done. So for our expeditions, for our fieldwork, it has always been a part of the work, at least since 1990s. Well, and what we have here in Siberia, in the majority of local communities with autochthonous population in Siberia and the Far East, including those where the autochthonous population represents the overwhelming majority and where people still keep traditional way of life, the main means of communication, both at home and in the community life, is Russian. And that's the situation. Well, I don't speak about the 5 languages given in blue. They're big, they have other problems. But as for other languages, only in some Nenets, no, in quite many Nenets communities, in some Hanti communities, in some Chukchi communities, the ethnic language is the main means of communication. Everywhere else, it is Russian. And Russian disappears from family life, sometimes even earlier. Then it disappears from, so to say, traditional economies, hunting, fishing. It remains there, but in the family, people are inclined to speak Russian with their children and keep their ethnic language only for themselves, to speak with their parents, for example, and parents speaking between themselves, so that the language, one of the main functions of minority languages in becomes a secret language, just covering the information. Parents speak their ethnic language, covering the content from children. By the way, sometimes it makes children to learn the language, to understand what parents want to hide from them. But not many, unfortunately, children do that. Well, children able to speak their ethnic language are scarce. They are found among Nenets in many groups. In some groups among Selkups, but 2-4 families for a settlement, no more. That's what is left. In most groups, the intergenerational transmission of ancestral language is broken. So the situation of language shift is today quite common for autochthonous communities of Siberia, and it concerns also some big languages, at least 3 of them. And meanwhile, each Soviet settlement gives a new fragment and quite often a new dimension of the linguistic situation in the area. So the more linguists do their documentational work, including sociolinguistic documentation, the more we can hope to understand the processes that go on in the communities, the process of language shift, for example, and the more can we understand about language structure, by the way, because knowing the linguistic situation helps to interpret linguistic data collected in the community. Well, how the community members, what community members think of the language shift process? Well, it can be said that the problem doesn't worry them, and well, language attrition is by another problem, not the language shift from the one side, and language attrition, just some process going on inside the language. Sometimes they pay attention to that too. But so all that worry the communities in the whole and the community members, but they mostly pour their attitude to ethnic languages, to the ethnic language is mostly positive. And the majority of parents, because we use questionnaires to collect sociolinguistic data. And we have questions like, what languages do you need in your life? Or what languages will your children need in their lives? So they often say, well, we want our children to speak the language, our ancestral language. But these parents do quite often do absolutely nothing to help their children. They themselves choose to speak Russian with their children, and thus, well, prefer not to pass the heritage to the children. So though the ancestral language is regarded as desirable, the majority of parents, by the majority of parents, it's Russian that is considered absolutely obligatory. And many people do not believe that anything can be done to stop the shrinking of the use of the ancestral language. And many of them just say, well, our language is dying. Not all. And there is the prejudice that is widespread all over the world, it seems, as far as I know about the situation in other with minority languages, autochthonous minority languages in other countries, and not only autochthonous minority languages. And this prejudice consists in deep belief that it is possible to learn the language of education, professional career, prosperity, and so on, only living, putting aside the language of the ancestors. And well, without without explaining the faults of this prejudice, nothing will be done to support languages. It's very important, the motivation, and if they believe that, if people believe that in our situation Russian is most important, then, and it's better not to teach children the ancestral language because it might spoil their pronunciation and so on, or they will switch up to, so it will be very difficult to persuade people to pass the heritage and not to bury it in the ground. Well, the first thing to be done is to overcome this prejudice and advertise the advantages of multilingualism. And well, it's well known everywhere now, and it's widespread, and people speak a lot about it. But well, to speak and to persuade, there is a difference in these two things. Education. In many settlements, there is a school, or at least primary school, and in some of those schools, pupils have mother tongue classes. But up to now, up to recently at least, the fact is that these classes are absolutely ineffective. So after 4 years of schooling, pupils don't have many hours, 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week, it's okay, of mother tongue, it's called mother tongue classes. And after 4 years of schooling, they just can count up to 10 or know some the names of some animals, but they cannot speak. So it's the method of schooling, I suppose. Well, the results of teaching depend on, it's quite clear. And I want to stress the last point in this list: language variety chosen to be taught. So the results of teaching really depend on that, because if the language remains in the community, at least in the grandparents' generation, the fact that some other variety, and of course it's the local language, the local variety of the language, the local dialect, but quite often at school people try, no, teachers and authorities and school authorities insist on that. They try to teach the so-called standard language. So the standard produced on the basis of some other dialect. But this standard doesn't have any prestige anywhere, even in the community where this dialect is spoken. Sorry. So language variety, I'm absolutely sure that to reach results in teaching autochthonous languages is to teach the language variety of the community. Because in this case, grandparents will help the children. Now, many of them just say, you are taught a wrong language. What do they do at school? And the children are, just lose their motivation. Well, attitudes towards multilingualism in local communities of Siberia. Multilingualism is respected. That's for sure. But for many community members, it is mostly regarded as capacity of the past heroes. People often say, well, my father, or my grandfather, or my grandmother spoke several languages, and they are proud of their ancestors, but they don't think it is possible now. Those who speak their ethnic languages are bilingual because all Siberian ethnic groups speak Russian. But more than that, more than two, no. And monolinguals are mostly those who speak only Russian. Only among Nenets there are some monolinguals with Nenets. Maybe also some among the Chukchis, but it's among the children, small children, when they come to school, they learn Russian, of course. But they keep the language, so it's a great thing, I suppose. Well, and it's, unfortunately, he is no more with us here on our earth. It is Yuri Alexandrovich from the village of Rata, and he once expressed his attitude towards bilingualism, and he produced a beautiful text. Well, just I asked him what he thinks about his son, and his son speaks the language. By that time, it was some 5 years ago, by that time his son was 27. But there were many young people in the village who didn't speak Selkup. And Yuri Alexandrovich produced a beautiful text about the privileges of bilingualism. He said that those who speak two languages can think quicker, understand better, and he used a beautiful expression, their ears are clear. It's an idiom in Selkup. So to have clear ears means to understand well. I think in Russian and also in most of European languages, we say, I see, meaning I understand. In Selkup and in many languages in Siberia, people say, I hear, meaning I understand. Well, linguistic situation in district centers. First, in district centers, so in small villages, autochthonous population built quite often, no, not so often, but not so seldom, majority of the population, the bulk of the population. And even in this situation, the language is not kept. They shift to Russian. But in district centers, which are big, little towns or big towns, or even not often, but cities too. So the autochthonous groups are minorities. What happens in big settlements with the languages? So first, because we worked in some 5 cities and about 15 towns, district centers, towns. And what we saw in those communities, autochthonous communities in these settlements, in these towns and cities, the role of ancestral languages in preserving or constructing indigenous identity in urban surroundings is higher than in small villages. In small villages, people just live. They don't pay much attention to if the language is still alive, if they still speak the language, to the connection of the language with their ethnic identity. In urban surroundings, this role becomes higher. Though the indigenous residents of district centers use their ethnic languages essentially less than in small settlements, their symbolic value here appears to be more significant. It's also clear. And the use of indigenous languages in non-traditional spheres, in radio, TV, press, is predominantly connected with the urban surroundings, with district centers. So for some people, ethnic language disappears from their private life, but becomes an essential part of their jobs, because there are cultural centers where some work is being done with linguistic heritage, local linguistic heritage. Then schools also, there are more pupils, so more teachers of ethnic languages, of autochthonous languages. Then language preservation and revitalization activities are also concentrated in district centers, mostly in district centers or in not in small villages, mostly in big villages or in towns. Well, the activities, these activities include, as a rule, ethnic language classes at school and kindergartens, as well as language groups for children and grown-ups outside school. Now, such groups are quite popular, and they are mostly organized in urban surroundings. Well, and finally, the internet connection in district centers is much better and cheaper. In not everywhere internet connection is attainable. and phone connection, yes, is not attainable everywhere. Of course, there is internet through Sputnik satellite phones, but through satellite. This internet is very expensive, and not many autochthonous people, residents can afford it. So in district centers, people get an opportunity to use their ethnic languages in the web. And now it is also rather popular. Well, some groups in WhatsApp and in Vivo and in Vkontakte, it's, I guess, Vkontakte, it's called like that. Not in Facebook, mostly in Vkontakte. So people just write something to each other, and sometimes they write in their languages, ethnic languages, in emails. Mostly not the whole messages, but some extracts, some phrases. So now it is also very popular. Well, and the magic force of the internet. Here you see children in a small, here not internet, of computer. So they watch their grandmother telling fairy tales and singing. We recorded it and then brought it to the family, because in a year when we, a year after we did the recording, this lady passed away, and we just brought it to her family, and the children are watching their grandmother. And if some recordings, especially video recordings of texts in autochthonous languages appear in the web, and these are mostly texts recorded from representatives of the elder generations. The young people, they like to watch it, and they get proud of their grandmother or grandfather, and they show their friends the recordings in the web. So they were never interested in hearing their grandparents alive, but through web, it becomes nearer to them and more interesting to them. Well, now I'm going to speak about language contacts in the area. And you saw the maps, and you saw that the linguistic areas are mixed. And Russian came and interfered into the panorama of languages on the linguistic map and in the reality. So I'll just show two cases of language contacts in the area, And I'll show that language shifts. Now we have in the majority of autochthonous community, the process of language shift started in Siberia, in the forest, started. And the communities differ only in the point of the process, whether it has just started or it goes on or is at the final stage. All the communities shift now. Yes, this process changes ethnic language to Russian. So the language where people shift, in which people shift, is Russian today. But it wasn't like that even some 50 years ago and earlier, of course. And I'll show it discussing, well, the case of North Selkup. North Selkup. North Selkup is a Samoyed languages, and now it is split into 2 languages. It is divided officially on the site of the Institute of Linguistics, Russian Academy of Sciences. We have the list of languages of Russia. And among autochthonous languages of Russia, we have 2 Selkup languages now. And I'll speak about North Selkup. It's the group is larger than the group of South Selkup, but if we see the number of speakers of South Selkup, 3 people, then we respect the figure 600 speakers in the northern Selkup communities in the whole. Okay, I'll show where the Selkup, northern Selkups live. North Selkup is spoken, it's here. It is, I'll show later another map. And here are neighbors of North Selkups. Ennets were their neighbors, some 300, 200, and maybe even 100 years ago, but no more now. Actually, Northern Selkups came from the Tomsk district in the 17th century, after the Russians began to penetrate to Siberia, and the Russian moved Hanti and the hunters, and the hunters moved the Selkups, and a part of Selkups moved to the north, and they settled down at the river of Tars, at the Tars River, but the places there were not free. They were occupied by the Ennets. And North Selkups fought with the Ennets, and they won and stayed there. And they partly assimilated Ennets and partly made them move to the north and to the west. So then forest Ennets in the south, tundra Ennets, Ket, the languages Evenki and different dialects, various different dialects of Evenki and Khanty. And of course, with Russian. And here is another map, and we see here the Taz River. It flows here, and here is the big Yenisei River. Wow, Yenisei River, and the settlements of this area are shown here. And you can see that the Selkups reside side by side somewhere with the Kets, here, where is Kellogg, mostly in Kellogg, and in Surgutiha and in Baklaniha, here at the Yenisei. And somewhere with the Khanties, East Khanties, here in these places. And the here they live side by side with the Evenkis, whom they assimilated by now. I'll tell you how long it took. And they also, in the village of Rata and in the surroundings, because some 100 or 70 or years ago, the majority of the Selkups lived in tents. They nomaded, and they came to the villages only to buy what they wanted to sell, their furs, and to pay taxes. Well, and somewhere here, yes, Chaselka, here, Selkups contact with the forest Enets, and in the north, here, they contact with the tundra, forest Nenets, with tundra Nenets, and here, again, with the Evenkis, but with another group, another Evenkis who speak another dialect. So, and here again with the Cats. So the place of their residence is all the contact zone with different peoples and different languages. So what produced this living side by side? Oh, well, sources of information, figure 3. On linguistic situation in the first half of the 20th century in northern Selkup local communities. So we want to trace what happened within the last 100 of years in Selkup communities. And what we use to understand how they lived at the beginning and in the first part of the 20th century. So we use some documents of the past, so to say, publications of that time, statistics, works by ethnographers, just descriptions of the area. We use archival data. We use retrospective publications of archival, and we also collect data of our own. We use family stories where people tell about their ancestors and sometimes mention what language they spoke. Then we interviewed people, just aiming at extracting information on the languages spoken in the community in the past, in their family and in other families. And we use questionnaires, we do sociolinguistic surveys, and the questionnaires also contain questions giving us information on linguistic biographies of the respondents and of their parents and grandparents. And dynamics of multilingualism in North Selkup local communities is as follows. We first, assimilation of Enets by Selkups, but it was long ago. It was not within the last century. It was not. It was in the 17th, 18th century. Then Khanty Selkup bilingualism and assimilation of Khantis by Selkups. The process is completed by now, and it happened at the Upper Tolka. I showed you where the Khanty is contacted with the Selkups. Selkup Khanty bilingualism and assimilation of Selkups by Khanty. It's to the south at the Vach River. There Selkups lived with the Khantis and were assimilated by the Eastern Khantis, and now no trace of the language there. Evenki Selkup bilingualism, and then assimilation of Evenki by Selkups, the Apataz, Rata, I told you about it, and Selkup Evenki bilingualism, assimilation of Selkups by Evenkis at the Upper Turuhan in the north. Not full assimilation, but there are some Selkup families who represent Evenki, Selkup names, family names, and these names are carried by heads of Evenki families. And we had Selkup Ket bilingualism, and it was completed in assimilation of Selkups by Kets, and it happened at the Lower Kureka, just dialect, Karasina Selkup dialect disappeared there, and Kellogg and Baiha and Surgutiha, they are Ket win, one, yes. Then Ket Selkup bilingualism and assimilation of Kets by Selkups at the middle Turuhan. And here is a map of the situation at the beginning of, some 500, not at the beginning, in the middle of the previous century. We have all those people. Once again, and I'll cite one interesting document. It was an article published in 1930. An economist and partly ethnographer went to the Upper Tars to to survey the households and to decide who among the Selkups can be called kulaks, rich, because it was the time of collectivization. That awful time, and well, they wanted to the authorities wanted to decide whom they should send God knows where and take all the wealth from them. So they wanted to decide who are poor, whom they can call poor people, whom they can call wealthy people, and whom they can call rich people on the territory. But this man, his name is Victor Scalon, he not only described the economic situation, but also linguistic situation of the area, though it wasn't his objective at all. And he writes, I didn't notice concerning Semebenkis and Selkups. I didn't notice any tension between the Tunguses and the Selkups of the area. Though the Tunguses represent 1/3 of the population there, and the Tunguses came there and settled down among the Selkups. They are almost fully assimilated with the Ostiak Samoyeds. Evenki Ostiak Samoyed family relations, having a long history, several generations, can be found practically in every tent. And the Tungus language, Evenki language is meant, though preserved in some households, practically is not used outside home, even among relatives. The Evenkis of the Apatas use Selkup instead. The Tungusic youth and children forget their mother tongue in some tents. It is almost forgotten even by the middle-aged. So it is, Scalon was there in 1929, but Evenki, surveyed until the beginning of the 1970s, because I was lucky to participate in the expedition and to get to Rata in 1971. I was a student by that time, and by that time, elderly Evenkis, those who were over 60, all spoke Evenki as their first language. They also spoke Selkup. And in 1996, it was next time when I got to the same place, there were still several elderly Evenki speakers, under 10 persons. And there was even men who remembered epics, Evenki epics. And by 2012, none spoke Evenki in the basin of the Upper Taz anymore. So it took 70, 80 years to put an end to Evenki. So Evenki was now is fully assimilated. And it's interesting that ethnic Evenkis, though most of the Evenkis have Selkups among their ancestors, so they speak Selkup quite often better than ethnic Selkups. In mixed families, I don't know whether the situation is like that in other places of the world, but in Siberia, I've noticed it not once. Descendants from mixed families preserve at least one of the languages of their parents better sometimes than the descendants of pure ethnic families. Well, and these are Evenkis from Rata. The photo is from 1996. And a lady, she doesn't speak Evenki, she's half Evenki, half Selkup, but she speaks Selkup very well. And another example, the Upper Tolka, assimilation of the Vachanti by Selkups, and the same author, Skalon, writes, people say about half a century ago, actually probably earlier, a certain Vachant from the Kunin clan moved with his sons to the Upper Tolka. The family grew and was supported by two more families from the Vach, which joined them later, so that the Vach Ostiak occupied practically all the Tolka basin down to the Devil's Lakes system. Three Kunin families settled down at the Devil's Lakes. And now it was 1929 of the Vach Ostiaks resided in this area, and having mixed with the Ostiak Samoyeds, with the Selkups, and having no living connection with the Vach, the Ostiaks acquired their language, Selkup. They usually speak the local language, Selkup is meant, among themselves. In some families, the Vach is no more a native language. The youth, and especially the children, often don't know the Vach language. So language shift started at that time, and not started, was at hand. And in these are Vach Selkups from the Upper Tolka, and they have Vachs among their ancestors. When I got to those places in 2000, there were still some elderly ladies remembering Hanti, but they didn't speak it, they just remembered. And there was one young man, well, about under 30, he knew Hanti because he was brought up by his grandmother. Well, the Lower Kurika, I think I'll skip other examples. It's clear that such situations happen. So people shifted from Autochthonous language to Autochthonous language, and these are researchers of Selkup. I give their photos because they are great linguists and ethnographers, and he is the author of the first Selkup grammar. He published it in 1935, and she is the author of the best articles on Selkup culture. And this is the first school in the district at the Turuhan River, where those two, they were young by that time, taught Selkup children and learned their language. And these are people from the Turuhan River. Present day situation, like everywhere, so some contact-induced changes in Northern Selkup local dialects, and disappearance of the dual in some local dialect, then reduction of the mood system, reduction of the conjugation type system, lexical borrowings, of course, and structural borrowings in lexicon. And I want to give an example to finish my lecture. of contact changes, contact-induced changes in Evenki. And I'll show you the case of clusivity in Evenki. In Evenki, we have, that's language situation. It's like almost like everywhere. Well, and here is the map of the Evenki territory, and they reside from the Timor in the north up to the Chinese border in the south, and there are Evenkis in China, almost as many as in Russia, and from the Irtysh river in the west to up to the Sakhalin in the east. So they cover vast territory. They are split over this territory. They moved over this territory, changed places. And very many Evenkis were assimilated by Yakuts. But I'll speak about clusivity. So in Evenki and in some, not in all, Tungusic languages, there is an opposition of exclusive and inclusive in personal pronouns, first person plural, in possessive pronouns, in reflexive pronouns, and in personal verb forms. There are different suffixes for different markers for inclusive and exclusive forms, and in imperative and everywhere. So, and in possessive forms of nouns, also this inclusive and exclusive opposition. Now, forms are not many, so we analyzed the corpus of Evenki texts, and there are not many pronouns, because prodrop is quite regular in Evenki. Here are a couple of examples. We have Sururev, he went, and here to let's go. And this form, the form of the imperative, inclusive, is quite often. So how in the corpus we come across pronouns and also verbs and nouns marked with these suffixes and supporting this opposition. But elicitation data showed that still this opposition in imperative is preserved, and sometimes in verbs. People often mix inclusive and exclusive. So they often, they might use exclusive pronoun with an inclusive word, and vice versa. Inclusive pronoun mate and exclusive verb. Now there is a verb form. I told you that the imperative is used as it should be used. And it might be the influence both of Russian, but also of other languages all around, but because languages with which Evenki contexts have no this opposition, have no category of clusivity. But which is interesting, a new opposition appeared inside this category. The forms mit and mut, which were described in grammars as just variants of inclusive pronoun, first person plural, they began to mean different things. So mit is used in the context where only two persons are meant. For example, only we and you will go, and we, you and me, let us be friends. Then they are eating something, it seems, secretly, so not showing us. The forms mituk, mitu are inclusive, and so they built a sort of minimal inclusive. And the form mut is used in the contexts where many people are meant. We, you and all, and me, let's tell to the God how he hurts us. So the hero speaks to a big meeting. Now, in the written text, we come across such things. So this opposition grew, and I think it grew because of the contacts with the languages having dual forms, because most of all this opposition is spread in the north west, where the Evenki's contact with the Samoyedic languages, mostly Enets and also Selkups. Well, I'll show you just some faces. These are Evenkis. Some of them are last speakers or among the last speakers of their dialects. They are speakers of different dialects. And there are language activists among them. Thank you. And I think I took too much time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Olga. So I think we don't have time to show your project site, but I have just written it in the chat, okay?
Yes, thank you, of course.
It's now so everyone can see it later. You have mentioned so many important points from your project, from your research, that are similar to our points here in Brazil, from these indigenous languages and minority language, such as prestige, prejudice, identity, vitality in different domains of use, attitudes, language variety, and language variety. Which variety are we going to choose at education? It's the same thing we have here. But we have a question, and we don't only have time for a question. I will just read you the question we have, and you can answer it. What is the difference between indigenous languages and autochthonous languages that you have in the title of your speech? It's for me.
No difference.
Yes.
No difference.
Please answer this question.
No, in Russian.
Okay. Please. Can you answer this question, Nina?
It's the same, you know. I really don't know which term to choose, and sometimes I use indigenous languages and sometimes autochthonous languages, but the meaning is the same, only the roots are different. The languages from those places, actually, they are not autochthonous. the majority of the speakers of what we call autochthonous languages of Siberia came from the south. They moved, they occupied the places, then other waves moved. And so, but still we call them languages of this place.
Yes, we have just talked about it with you by email, and we can go on talk because we talk from the immigrants' language here, New Autochthonous, and you have told me that you just call them New Autochthonous language as well. Huh?
I'll tell you when we use this term. Some people from at the beginning of the previous century, some people and even groups of people, sometimes the whole, even villages moved to Siberia to settle down there. The government gave some money, some support, and they made their villages of their own. So we have Estonian villages in Siberia, Polish villages in Siberia, and we keep these languages for languages of Russia, though they have countries of their own, those where they are state languages, but still they occupy a territory where they live for pretty a long time. So they are a sort of new languages.
Okay, so I can say thank you very, very much for your lecture in the name of Abralin. And when people want to say something more, we can do it in the chat. We can go on speaking with you and with you as well. We can go on discussing our team.
Yes, thank you.
It's a very important one. So thank you very much.
And thank you for having invited me. And if you send me questions, there are any,
yes, you can do it. I can send it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry for taking so much time, really.
No, but it's very interesting.
I had to stop.
It's about to say, it's a lots and lots of languages in Siberia. It's about to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.